Hey, David. So nice to meet you, man. Glad we were able to sync up a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So cool. So you were out of town, I guess, last week, and you got like took like a 3 hour nap when we were initially going to do this.
Yeah, I was supposed to fly to New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and my flight got canceled, so I decided to fly to Philly instead because I was in Texas, so I'm like, as long as I get into the Northeast, I'm better off.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can get like a rental car or a bus or a train or whatnot. Um, and then, which was the day before we were supposed to record,
Yeah.
and then I ended up wandering around Philly until 4 o'clock in the morning to catch a bus to New York City, and got to New York City. And I was like, I got into where I was staying and I was settled down and I set up everything for the show. And then I was like, I got 2 hours. I'm going to set like four alarms for like a half an hour nap and I'll be good. And then I woke up like 3.5 hours later and I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
So
No
my
problem. Honestly,
apologies.
no, you're good because I'd be a hypocrite if I cared. Honestly, because I think that same day I had to. I think I woke up like an hour and a half late for work, which as long as I make the dials, I'm a sales guy by day. So
Mm.
as long as I do that, I'm fine. But it's just it's fine. I just thought it was funny because it reminded me of a buddy when I was in college who would take like he would call me and say like, "Hey, yo, I just woke up for like a 4 hour nap." and I'm just and it was just like, yeah, that's supposed to be like only like 15 minutes there, bro. But nah, he was a good kid. He was a good kid. Um, but yeah, so you've been pretty active. I was talking to Gabby a little bit, who helped us set this up, and the just looking through. So I guess let's start with the podcast and how did you start that up, and we can delve a little bit into how you came to the fight for liberty and everything like that.
Yeah, sure. So I started my YouTube channel when I ran for New York City Council in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I unfortunately the way that politics and just the world these days works, it's just like the more content you can get out there, the more likely it is you're going to be successful at whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, I was just like making really short videos, either about like my policy or like current events or something like that. I only made like probably 7 or 8 videos during my campaign. And then I I didn't touch it for a few months until the COVID stuff hit and I was back home uh, with my parents because I had uh, left my lease in New York City already. I was just traveling for work, and then obviously it wasn't traveling for work in the beginning of 2020. So I was like, I have nothing better to do. I'm just kind of like stranded here in bumfuck nowhere, upstate New York. I might as well actually try to put some energy into this show. And so I used to have 2 episodes a week. One was an interview style, and one was like me by myself, kind of uh, like news kind of thing, like semi-written script and like edited with overlays and graphics and stuff, which was way too much work when I started going back to actual work.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down to just doing the interview style shows, which is what I still do now. I try to do 2 episodes a week still. It's hit or miss, especially this month. I don't think I'm going to do a single episode in the month of March. This is going to be the only podcast I do this month, I think.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, last week was, I mean, all the traveling that we were just talking about, and then this week I'm kind of taking a week off. Next week I'll be at South by Southwest, and then the following week I'm back to work for a runoff campaign, and so it's just I'm going to be moving around like crazy, and I don't want to uh, put myself in a situation where I have to be somewhere at a specific time
Right,
to
right, right.
actually do the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was supposed to do one last night, but the my guest actually canceled on me, so
Oh, that sucks.
works out.
Yeah, happens. I had that too with a guy. He was another comic I know. He was gonna come on, and then and you get the whole you good for tomorrow, yeah. And then then tomorrow comes, and then 2 hours after the interview, you're like, sorry, dude, I had to help my mom move. He's a funny guy, so I hope I have him on. But it was just kind of a shame about that. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean. I was doing the same thing with this podcast. I was when the city shut down. We were doing. I needed something to pour my creativity into, and then so I just bit the I won't say bite the bullet, but swallowed my pride, and just said like, all right, I'll do the podcast thing,
Hmm.
and then well, I should say we, it was just me really. I was just doing the whole rant, babbling for an hour about whatever was on my mind. It was a good practice too,
Hmm.
of learning how to just talk for an hour, and kept me all right for stand up. But then what ended up happening was it wasn't compelling enough, and then like you were saying, you just gotta shoot video, dude. You gotta like have guests on, have conversations and everything like that. So now it's a whole production.
Hmm.
And even last night, I was up till like 3 in the morning. Like, I uploaded an episode today. Today is Wednesday with David Bose. So now he's on, and that's all out there. And it's just, but also I got a day job, so it's like working also. I gotta
Yeah.
mix it up. But I guess talk a little bit about your podcast. So it's called Fight for Liberty, and it's libertarian. I was listening to a couple. You have a lot of local libertarian guys going in and talking about that stuff too. So
Yeah, I feel like I just want to put it. I feel like with you as a comedian and with me as a libertarian, it was almost a matter of time before both of us had a podcast. It's kind
yeah,
of like a rite of passage for both of our groups.
yeah,
Um, but so my show, it's very much internal messaging focused. It's pretty much a show for libertarians. And what I do is I bring on people that I think are doing a good job at fighting for liberty. I like using the puns of my last name. It's my favorite. But I bring on people that are doing the work and actually fighting for liberty, and I try to get a mixture of like humanizing them and kind of introducing them to my audience so that people can see that they're like a real person, not just someone behind a desk that they don't really know what they do. And then also getting like really tangible, actionable advice on how my viewers can do the similar things to what these guys are doing. So, I have on like graphic designers and video editors, as well as, lobbyists and politicians to talk about all the different things that you could be doing to help fight the state. And my goal is that, who's kind of dabbled in video editing maybe would watch my episode with like Dan Smots and be like, oh wow, this is really cool. He's able to do a lot of really good things for multiple campaigns. I want to put my energy into that and kind of actually go forward with it. And I've actually gotten plenty of like DMs and texts from people that are like, hey, I watched this episode and now I'm doing this thing. And like, so it's working. It's starting to work, I should say, as the audience is ramping up, and I'm getting better and better guests on, and it's really exciting to see people. Because I think the liberty movement has been very siloed into like running political candidates. And so a lot of people, when they join the party or they join the movement, they think, oh, I have to either be a candidate or like work on a campaign. And
Mhm.
there's just so many other things that you can do to
Yeah,
fight against the state, like organize a food drive and feed homeless people without a permit. Like that's technically illegal, and like, but you should still do it because like feeding people is a good thing. And
yeah.
uh yeah, it's just I'm glad to be able to break people out of the idea that they have to do like one or two things if they want to be a good libertarian.
So I get it now. Your focus is just practical. So what can I do to live as a libertarian? And
Pretty
actually,
much,
just
yeah.
oh, cool. I mean, that's definitely outside the box. I mean, before for the longest time, when I was in college, libertarianism was just an ideology. Was just I was part of Students for Liberty. We were in the club,
Mhm.
and it was pretty cool at the time because that's where I met Gabby, and that's where I met a lot of other guys too. Where um, because it was 2012, the debate was just happening with Romney and Obama at our university, and then you know Gary Johnson was running, so we got to meet him, and I was telling Bose, Fox Business at the time still
Mhm.
had a lot of libertarian shows on there, so you could call Fox Business was the libertarian channel
Yeah.
for a period of time. And but yeah, and then there were some guys that were running for office, but they never really got anywhere. So it almost seemed like it was kind of sidelined. a little bit, but you think it's a better approach just to take like action in your daily life, just to be as a libertarian, not necessarily run for office.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally of the opinion, and this is honestly a fairly new revelation because I have spent the last 6 years like actively working in the Libertarian Party and working on campaigns. Um, but I'm of the opinion at this point that you know, politics is always going to get corrupted, whether you're trying to start a party or a political campaign or anything like that. Anything that's 100% focused on the political system, I think is doomed
Mm-hmm.
because that's I mean it's just a flawed system. And to we can help people by teaching them how to be self-sufficient, by you know helping reduce the level of influence that the government has on their life by trying to get rid of things like cannabis criminalization and other things like that. We can fight the state in much more tangible ways, and just pretty much the a concept that we talk a lot about in the liberty movement is just harm reduction. It's just how can we make sure that the government is hurting as few people as possible tomorrow compared to today, and keep going on. And so that's really where my focus is now, is just how do we make sure that by the time society collapses in the next decade or two, uh, we can have as many people survive that as possible, because they know how to be self-sufficient, they know how to like hunt and cook and whatnot, and they're not just uh, leeches on a welfare system and in a city system where they just have no idea how to even do the bare like basics of
Basics.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like if you take somebody in the city and you throw them out in the middle of nowhere, they won't know how to survive.
Mhm.
That idea. So you all right, so I get it now. So you take this from the perspective of, correct me if I'm wrong, society is gonna go belly up and we need to be able to like function without a government.
Uh yeah, pretty much. I think we've got maybe another like 20 to 40 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
is my personal predicament. I
Mm-hmm.
know that people have been screaming like apocalypse since Jesus, but
Mm-hmm.
uh I don't think that like the necessarily the world is going to end or anything. I just think that the American empire itself is about at its ending point. We've seen this with most of the other empires that collapse before us, like the Byzantine Empire, the Roman, or the Greeks. Uh, they overextend themselves militarily.
Mm-hmm.
They deconstruct what sexuality and gender and morals
Mm-hmm.
mean. They devalue their currency beyond like recognition. Their government systems become extremely corrupt under the guise of democracy. It's just this trajectory that we've watched with almost every empire collapse
Mm-hmm.
that makes me think we've got maybe like 20-40 years left.
Wow, we were lucky to be born now.
Right.
No, I mean, I've joked about that with people. How it's like, it's time for human race to end. Societies, countries going to hell. Um, but you can't say that in like, certain social situations. Otherwise, people just like don't take you seriously.
Right.
But this is just it's nutty. But I hear that. No, it's so. What do you think's gone wrong in the past 20 years? And obviously I think we speak a similar language, so I kind of get it. But just for like
Mhm.
folks that might not know listening to this, because I want where are we? What's where did it go wrong, or what or are we doing wrong, or could we have? Because yeah, let me just start with that.
Well, I like to tell people that the American dream died during the Whiskey Rebellion back in 1782 or whatever that was. Because we were supposed to be a free people. We literally rebelled against England because they were taxing us too much, and then we started trying to tax people, and those people rebelled, keeping the true American values. And Washington and Alexander Hamilton went
Mm-hmm.
down with a small army, crushed that rebellion real quick. There actually wasn't a whole lot of death. They kind of just outnumbered them, and the people who were trying to rebel were just like, all right, fine, fuck it, we'll pay our taxes. Um, But like in my opinion, like that's where we went wrong. As soon as we violated our agreement from the beginning, like we were already set down this path of whatever the government says goes, even if it violates the promises that they made.
Mm,
And so we've just kind of seen that continue over the last 200 years of just promise after promise after promise being broken. The Constitution is basically null and void at this point in time. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have the right to bear arms. We don't have freedom of religion. The Ninth and 10th Amendments are completely gone because the federal government is doing way more than it was supposed to do originally, and the state governments have lost so much power. And then I really think like coming off the gold standard in 71,
sure.
uh, put us down this economic trajectory that we're seeing. And when you mix tyranny and bad economics together, it just doesn't work out well. It looks like it works out well for a little while, and
Hmm.
that's why Russia looked good for a while, and China's looking good now. And we
Hmm.
looked good in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but it's the crash in '08 was inevitable, and we really
Hmm.
haven't recovered from that.
Hmm.
And now I'm as horrible and terrible as COVID was, I have to say it was a little refreshing seeing so many people wake up to exactly how much the government actually cares about your well-being and how much it cares about you obeying what they told you to do.
Hmm.
And that's, like I said, I feel like that's kind of been the case since Hamilton and Washington. Is they really just it's been about obedience.
Yeah, I hear that when it comes to when you look at COVID, people are waking up to the idea of just, yeah, we can just lock you down and do what they say. And it kind of got me into a little funk for a while where it's just like, is this what life's going to be? I mean, granted, that was me projecting and fear based thinking and a bunch of other defects of character, but of just not looking in the long term. Because right now, I mean, here in New York, I don't know where you are, but yep, everything's dropped here, and so
Mhm.
it's kind of business as usual now. But then again, it's a blue state, and Cuomo was a micromanager and
Mhm.
loved to use like the boy king and loved to tell people what to do. And you had to beg him to, I remember the movie theaters, AMC, writing an open letter begging him to open up the movie theaters in the city, and then he finally did it. But you had to beg
Mhm.
him for everything. So I guess you think COVID was like just a wake up call for everybody that this is going to be the new normal. I mean, not to
I
use a
don't know
term
about
everybody uses, you know.
I don't know about everybody, but it was definitely it was a bigger I think a bigger number of people woke up um from this than like the crash in '08 and like Occupy Wall Street and that kind of movement, which
Hmm.
was a really based movement that I'm just a little bit too young to have really taken part in, but I got to watch it. I was probably like, what, 15, 16 when that was going on.
Same about.
Um and so like that woke a lot of people up, but they kind of went, a lot of those people went back to sleep afterwards,
Yeah.
because they got placated and we elected Obama, right? Like so problem solved. The evil Republicans are gone, and we have this new great Democrat. And so everybody just kind of like went home. And a lot of the same stuff happened this past year with BLM. It was like a bunch of people were about to wake up, but then, oh, well, we got the racist white guy out and replaced him with an even more racist, even more whiter guy.
Hmm.
And so we're fine now. And BLM can just go home and like we won because we have Democrats in the White House again.
Hmm.
Where COVID, I think, is actually, I will say if like Biden loses in 24, I think we'll see this kind of a similar thing with COVID, where it'll be like, oh, we got the Republicans back in, we're fine, and people will go right back to sleep. But because we didn't get that, and I don't think we will get a Republican in 24.
Hmm.
Um, this is becoming like a much longer fight. Like this is going to be at least like a 6 year long knockdown drag out fight that's going to start having states really look into how to nullify federal orders, have counties looking into how to nullify state orders, because you have a whole bunch of like red counties in upstate New York that have been just non-compliant with a lot of this stuff.
Hmm.
And we're going to see that have to become like actually written down on paper and like nullify the statewide mandates on a county level and not just kind of like turn a blind eye to it. As this keeps going on, I think we're going to see a lot more uh, just kind of dividing up of the people and showing like, you know, we can be kind of independent here as a county and kind of make decisions for ourselves here, because there's no reason that New York City should be telling like Syracuse or Buffalo what they should be doing. It just makes no sense. They're 7 hours away from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and their cultures are completely different. I grew up upstate and then lived in the city for 5 years, and they shouldn't even be the same state, if you ask me. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, even I was just on Long Island over the weekend, and even that's like, going to Kentucky.
I mean, we can just push that out into the Atlantic. We don't need Long Island
Oh,
anymore.
you know,
I'm kidding. I actually have a lot of friends on Long Island, so I just
yeah,
shit on it regularly.
that's fair. I met my parents were my mom was born in Brooklyn, but she like grew up in Baldwin, and my
Mm.
dad was Malvern. So got some family over there, but no, I hear that when you're from a place, you just always hated it.
Mm.
Uh, I agree with you on this point. I will say it's not probably surprising to you, but it's just surprising how COVID shed light on how powerful these states can be. They operate as their own little countries. So you think it's better to have just like let a county run itself independently, let a state run itself independently? I see you're confused, or it happens sometimes. You hear me now?
Yeah, there we
Your
go.
connection, yeah, yeah. I was so what I was saying was the going back to you're now talking about how so you see the future of counties becoming even more independent from the larger state, and then states be more independent from the federal level. You feel that's gonna come about?
I hope so. Like, I mean, that's the honestly, yeah, that's like the optimist in me coming
Mm-hmm.
out. We haven't really seen a whole lot of that, but I think that it's really the only logical way for the people who don't want to continue to take their 87th booster shot and wear a mask
Mm-hmm.
4 years from now, uh, to like live the lives that they want to live. So yeah, I mean, like I have seen a little bit of that upstate of just non-compliance in the counties,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm really hoping that that trajectory continues, especially since we have at least another 2.5 years of federal Democratic majority.
Yeah. And do you feel too? So wait, do you find yourself as a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist?
It depends on who I'm talking to be
Mm-hmm.
perfectly honest. I
Yeah.
am an anarchist,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I will usually refer to myself as a libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking to like a normie,
Mm-hmm.
for two reasons. One, the word anarchy scares people, and two, the word libertarian needs to get used more and more normalized. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll usually go with that if I'm talking to someone who I think I might be able to talk into maybe voting for a Gary Johnson type candidate in the near
Mm-hmm.
future. If I'm talking to somebody that I think I might actually be able to like bring them over into full on anarchy mindset, I'll call myself an anarchist. But yeah, I think you can be both at the same time. They're kind of, there's a pretty overlapping Venn diagram. Um, or like, I think if you are an anarchist, you are a libertarian. It's just not necessarily vice versa. It's like the square rectangle thing. Um, but yeah, and I'd never call myself an anarcho-capitalist because I actually, if you ask me to find like the kind of anarchy, I've always gone by anarchist without adjectives,
Mm-hmm.
which means like I don't really care what system people want to create. I don't have a preferred system. I'm not an anarcho-communist. I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. I see the value in both sides and the 87 different groups in between those two.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I honestly think that if we ever got to that like anarchist utopia where we have like 350 different like nation states all around the country,
Mm-hmm.
I would continue doing what I do now, which is traveling around them and getting to experience all the different states and all the different areas. Like I wouldn't like pick a system that I like and go move there and stick there. I would continue to just kind of enjoy all of it. So yeah, I'm just an anarchist. No system preference for me.
Dope, man. I mean, I haven't seen a anarchy. I mean, I talk about anarcho capitalists since like I was at like a Students for Liberty conference,
Mhm.
which was yeah, because you can't. Because the funny thing about when you say you're a libertarian, people think you just smoke weed and live in a trailer, or
I mean, I do smoke weed, but
yeah, yeah. Who doesn't nowadays? You know, it's kind
right.
of it's hip. But the what's funny is that everybody when they talk about libertarianism, they think, oh, so you want to abolish you? Oh, you well. Let's start with that. Everyone just talks about libertarianism and just people just want weed to be legal, or they just want highways to be privatized, or fire department being privatized. But there are steps to that. I mean, if we got like let's say like a Ron
Mhm.
Paul or Gary Johnson in office, um, you would the turning towards a libertarian society would take steps. It wouldn't be like that. All of a sudden, we'd be saying
Mhm.
like, let's abolish speed limits, you know, on the highways. Which I remember reading an article about. We wouldn't be doing that. It would just be
Mhm.
step by step. I guess forming that into a question: if we got like a libertarian candidates in office, being on the state or federal level, what how would they start saving the empire? Let's put it that way.
Well, I'll say that one of my favorite things about working with libertarians is that that answer is going to be different for literally every single candidate,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it really fun because they're actually like attacking what they care about, not what their party platform tells them that they should care about. Um, but I mean the if we got a libertarian elected president, like the very first thing that any libertarian would do is bring all of our troops home,
Mm-hmm.
and stop all of these foreign wars, stop bombing Yemen, stop bombing Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
stop like all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's like step one, and that's actually straight out of Ron Paul's mouth. Step two, I would say, I mean, honestly, just once we fix the military industrial complex, we end up like fixing a lot of our budgeting issues as well. Um, but I would personally like if I'm president, I would just start pardoning like everyone. I mean, obviously not everyone, but like every nonviolent criminal in the entire country is just like every person that's locked up for weed, for speeding, driving on a suspended license, like anything that isn't like you killed someone or physically harmed someone or stole money from or stole something from someone or defrauded someone. If there
Mm-hmm.
isn't a victim, you're gone. Like you're out of jail, free. That would be my personal step two. Um, and I honestly think if we just like released an extra like 500,000 people back into the workforce right now, I think that would do a lot of good for our country as well.
Yeah, because there's supposed to be like a employees shortage or something
Mhm.
like that. Yeah.
Maybe if we weren't locking them all up, we wouldn't have an employees shortage.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was because COVID hit and everybody had this epiphany of like, oh, this is what I really want to do with my life. I want to do something else. I thought that's what it was about.
Mhm.
But
I mean, it really, this one is, which I find really fun because like I do know a lot of people that used to work some soul sucking like McDonald's job or something like
mhm,
that, that figured out that even similarly soul sucking jobs like DoorDash or Uber were still more fun for them, and that they like really enjoyed this kind of lifestyle, and they've started traveling and they've started like building better friendships because they have a more flexible schedule. And
right.
I do really like this shift that we've seen, especially in our generation,
Hmm.
towards this like different kind of work style. Um, I'm excited to see where it ends up once the if the economy kind of settles itself and we stay that way, or I don't know. I'm kind of curious how it all shakes out.
Yeah, me too. I mean, working from home, people going to an office 2, 3 days a week, people traveling. I had an interview for a job one time where they would give me all this breakdown of like, you can work remotely, but we need you in this state permanently, but you can travel and be in you can go into Europe for 2 weeks, blah blah blah. It's just it was weird. I didn't know this work from home now already has laws to it. Did you know about that? Or
No.
yeah, apparently there's a whole thing now where like you can like you have to reside in a certain state, but you can go travel. I mean, obviously no one's going to tell you where to go. You just have to hold residency in one state, and then you have to be
Hmm.
even, and you can be abroad for like 2 weeks total, which is interesting. I had no idea about that. Anyway, um,
Nice.
so everything you were saying was pretty practical. Now, didn't, let's just put it this way, President Trump do some things like that with prison reform, and he kept us out of foreign wars. So, is there
Mhm.
any, now? I'm pitch this because I haven't talked to a libertarian about this in a while. Now, so isn't there a case to say that Trump was good for was for libertarians in some capacity, in some ways?
Um, so I still like, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I still don't know if Trump is like the dumbest person to ever run for office,
Mm.
or like the smartest person to ever run for office, or just like the puppet with the hand farthest up his ass. Because I'm personally still of the impression that Donald Trump is a New York City Democrat,
Mm.
always has been, always will be. And if you look at a lot of the stuff that he, like the stuff that you're mentioning, even those are leftist issues to be good on.
Mm-hmm.
Like the couple of things that I think he did good on are still Democrat issues,
Sure.
for the most part, except for some of the like deregulation. He did some stuff with the taxes and a little bit of deregulation that I liked. Um, he didn't start any wars, which is great. I honestly don't give him very much credit for that, especially after the assassination of General Soleimani, which was entirely his idea. He was just like, "Hey, let's go like murder the most beloved general in like that would be like somebody assassinating Colin Powell to us. Like that's the level of person that we assassinated in like late 2019." And I actually give Rand Paul a lot of credit for that situation, because he met with Trump like 5 times in 2 days and like it's pretty much talked him out of going to war with Iran. Um, but yes, I will always give Trump credit that he didn't start any new wars.
Mm-hmm.
The First Step Act was the best like cannabis legislation we have seen from a federal level ever. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that he did a couple of things right, but mixed with how many things he did wrong,
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily consider it a win. Um, and then especially after January 6th, I'm not, I don't, I don't care about what happened on January 6th
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I care about the response. Trump just like handed the Democrats all of this
Mm-hmm.
domestic terrorism conversation, and like the laws that got written in the wake of December or of January 6th were worse than the stuff that got written in the wake of 9/11. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was just crazy amounts of like, we can spy on our own citizens, we can arrest them for no reason, hold them for days without cause, just because we think they might possibly want to overthrow the government. And I'm like, well, shit, I've wanted to overthrow the government for a decade now. Like, um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, so that's honestly my biggest gripe with Trump is, I mean, if you watch him, he single-handedly handed the House, the Senate, the presidency to the Democrats, and then gave them the story that they needed to enact some of the most tyrannical policies they ever have. And then just kind of disappeared. Like he didn't help any of the people that got arrested on January 6th. He was still president, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he could have pardoned everyone, but he
Right. Right.
didn't. He could have pardoned like Assange and Snowden too, didn't. Like he had, once he lost, there were a lot of people that were excited that he was going to spend that last 2 months being super awesome, and then he was just worse than he ever was and just even more useless. He took all of his last pardons and used them on actual criminals, just like actual horrible people, and left like Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange and those people still rotting in a jail cell.
Hmm.
So I think that he checked a couple of good boxes, and I honestly think he was just the kind of person that if you told him an idea that he thought sounded good, he would try to do the thing. And like as a businessman, that's kind of how most CEOs kind of operate. So I think someone just kind of got in his ear at the right point in time and was like, "Hey, this First Step Act thing is going to be cool." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I love weed." He's been pro weed since like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then just walked that back when he joined the Republican Party because he knew it wasn't going to get him elected.
Right. He was interesting. Yeah, I know he was at one point not particularly anti-gay. That's interesting. Tell me a little bit more about the. I didn't know about the January 6th, all the laws that were written. I mean, I'm sure there were, but that went under the radar. Of what
Mm.
laws were about. Now you're telling me that they can do more spying on people than they would be before.
Yeah, so they basically strengthened a lot of the Patriot Act stuff
Hmm.
because they kind of they by mix it by calling it domestic terrorism, they got to kind of like just combine it all into what the anti-terrorism laws that we have, which like includes the Patriot Act and stuff like that. So we already have all of these extremely unconstitutional laws that allow the government to spy on you if they think that you're going to try to blow them up. Um, and so yeah, they passed multiple things that kind of looped domestic terrorism into that. And then you had a bulletin from the FBI, which like by their definition, I am 100% a domestic terrorist because it's like literally just like anyone that questions the government or has any plans for, yeah, it's just such a broad definition. And then so you take that and you combine it with the newer laws, which is how they do it. They never put it all in the same document to let people actually understand what's going on. It's
Hmm.
like laws that get written and then a bunch of like either case precedents or like official memos from either the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security are usually the ones that kind of push this stuff out. Um, and so all put together, it's like pretty much anyone that questions the government can be arrested and questioned.
Whoa.
They're obviously not going to use that anytime soon, right? It would be insane for them to show their cards quick enough, but the precedence is there. And like with most things, it's just kind of like slowly kind of gonna creep up and until someone finally actually gets arrested for a Facebook post, which is almost we're almost there. We have people getting actually, I've had friends who've been raided and questioned by various federal agencies for the parts that they play in either protesting groups or just anti-government groups. So like we're already getting to the point where they will quietly try to shut down a lot of this stuff. But as we get louder, them shutting us down is going to have to get louder. And so I don't think that we're too far away from seeing like an Australia level of like, hey, we're going to show up to your door with like a printout of all the things you've posted on Facebook that question vaccines. And we're going to like ask you about them at your door. And if you don't like denounce everything that you said on Facebook, we're going to arrest you. That's what's been going on in Australia like for almost a year now, which of course we're not really hearing much about.
Hmm.
Uh, because we got to go liberate Ukraine instead.
Yeah. That. I mean, you're talking about that, and just, I mean, COVID. I mean, people were anybody who said anything differently from. I mean, this was as recent as the Joe Rogan um, debacle. I'll just call it a
Yep.
debacle, where Rogan was just anytime he had someone who had a different opinion than what Fauci was saying, or even the ladies on the View were saying, it was it was seen as misinformation. And you're just like, dude, like what the hell? I mean, I'm glad he got through that, but we're already seeing that where if you just don't follow the mainstream or the
Mm-hmm.
line of thinking, from the legacy media or even the government, even if you're not even saying like blah 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 blah, X Y Z, you're being forceful about it. You're just talking about it or having a conversation. You get shut down. I mean, Rogan, thanks to his contract, and the deal he has with Spotify, he couldn't be canceled, but we're already seeing that now, and it's pretty scary. So it's just going to get worse now,
Yeah.
apparently, with this new law. Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, Rogan's still like I'm glad that he's still up and that he, like you said, kind of made it through it, but we're still like 160 episodes of his show are gone,
Mm-hmm.
including multiple episodes with friends of mine. His episode with Adam Kokesh came down, 2 episodes with Michael Malice, 1 episode with Dave Smith. Like a bunch of the like main anarchists and libertarians that he's had on the show were part of that 130 140 that came down. And like it really is crazy, like you're saying, that you don't even have to like actually say the things. Like I've said some things on my show that could be labeled as like anti-vaxxer propaganda or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and I wouldn't even blame them for labeling it that, because I've just gone on kind of like a riff or something. But like Rogan's vaccinated.
Right, right.
Yeah.
He got yeah, yeah. And there was even the
Like, how
guy.
do you call a vaccinated person an anti-vaxxer? It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, and that was I think one of the guys on the podcast too. He had I think Dr. Robert Malone also was vaccinated. So you even have a guy
Mhm.
who was vaccinated but says not going to but still going to be skeptical of it. It was a personal decision. Like when we had David Bose on last week, he was talking about how
Mhm.
he himself, he's a guy who has helped his skepticism of government, but it's just a personal decision to say, like, all right, I'm this age, I have this underlining illness, ailment, or whatever. I want to get vaccinated, but still against mandates. So you can be
Mhm.
for taking the vaccine, but also be against mandates. It's just government. Who's forcing you to do what? But that's I don't know how we. I'll say that I do agree with that. It's a little bit scary. Where just you have no idea what you're going to be allowed to say nowadays. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to think. Like a buddy of mine was even just texting me down, dude. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights are the only things saving this country from being, communist Russia. And I know what you're probably laughing because like the Constitution is null in your eyes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think that like if we didn't have a Second Amendment, we would be more fucked for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, continue. Uh,
No, he was just saying about how it's the only that piece of paper and the tradition of it, if it still holds anything, is saying how we have no idea. Who knows what can happen to the country now? But I
mhm.
don't know. Personally, me, I mean, you accept the things you cannot change. And right now, I'm still able to do my podcast in my apartment. I'm still able to go get a sandwich, do comedy, say what I want. I still feel pretty free in this country, but I get how. Who knows now? Now I'm doing this podcast, more of a public figure, having these kind of conversations now. Who knows what'll be taken down? I mean, I put something
Mhm.
on TikTok, um, which had a little COVID advisory, only because I was just asking Bose about his how he came to the decision that I'm okay with being vaccinated, and it didn't make him a sheep. You know,
Mhm.
it's so who knows what's going to happen. And how do you feel about stuff like that? Like TikTok and and data and people mining your data and using
Mhm.
it to. I saw a report, but basically their TikTok. It's not about twerking videos or anything like that. It's about like building AI and getting intelligence, and
Mhm.
that seems like a greater threat now.
So I actually is one of the things that I kind of like about TikTok. I don't use it,
Mm-hmm.
but I respect the people that built it, because you're right. Like it's built to mine data even better than like Facebook or Twitter does it. And just like on an objective level, I have respect for them for like building what they wanted to build and it working well, and becoming as popular as it is. I have kind of a tricky mindset when it comes to that kind of stuff because my background is sales and marketing.
Hmm.
So I understand that like the better and cleaner, and even now in politics, this thing stays true. The better and cleaner and more accurate your data is, the better life is for everyone, including the customer. Because like if this person isn't a Republican or doesn't need a new vacuum, me like knocking on their door and telling them about vacuums and Republicans is useless, right? And so the better the data is, the happier the customer is, the happier the salesman is, the better everything is. But to get good, clean data, you have to just mine it like that. And uh, it gets sold to who knows who and used who knows how. And the government has access to the majority of it at this point. And like there's that privacy thing for me as well. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle because I really like the idea of like people knowing who I am. Like if you're gonna mine my data, you might as well mine it accurately. Show me the ads that I actually want to see. Um, you know, I kind of don't care on one side, and then on the other side, I'm like, privacy, government spying.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm also kind of like at a point where uh, I know the government is spying on me. I know that I'm on a list of some sort. Not like one of the high priority lists, but I've worked with and for enough people that have definitely put me on the like, he should probably, let's keep an eye on this guy list. So like at this point, I think trying to like use all of these like anti-spying things and use a VPN and all of this other stuff is kind of just pointless because like they're probably gonna, like the people who I don't want to get my information are going to get it if they want it regardless. And the people who I actually do want to give my data to, like these sales companies, they're obviously not going to go through that. And so might as well just make it easier for them and just kind of live my normal life. Also, it takes a huge load off of my shoulders and my mind to just not even try to avoid it and just kind of live. But I definitely understand why a lot of people hate it and why a lot of people are really heavy on the privacy thing. I've just kind of, yeah, like I said, between caring about sales and marketing and just kind of giving up, I don't particularly care too much anymore.
Yeah, I guess it's just like, accept what you cannot change. And if a company is going to mine your data, they're just going to try to sell you something that they might like, you might like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, but if the government's mining it, you could be arrested. Um, maybe, maybe I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Depends on what you're doing, what you're saying. I wanted to ask you a little bit too, because I know you've ran for office before, and then tell me a little bit what that was like, and what, because how old are you, by the way? Because I don't even know. You sound like a
I'm
pretty young guy.
25.
Oh my God, you're younger than me. But so you're a young guy. You're 25. You ran for office. What was that experience like? Because like I couldn't even fathom doing that. I, you know, uh,
It was it was honestly like one of the most enjoyable things that I've ever done with my life. So I originally was going to run for public advocate in 2019, and I lost the Libertarian Party primary to my good friend Devin Balkine. And so he was running for public advocate, and really the only other election on the ballot that year was my city council district because I'm from Jumani Williams's city council district. So
mhm.
he had moved up to public advocate and left his seat vacant. So I was like, all right, Devin's going to run for public advocate. I'll run for city council. It's literally like the only two like non-judge positions up for election this year. And I was a white male libertarian running against a black female Democrat in Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Mhm.
So I did not do great.
Yeah, yeah.
But I got to just actually get out and talk to people about what really matters to them. It talking about politics because it's so pervasive into every area of life. You can talk to someone about politics, and really what you're talking to them about is what they care about the most. Like
Hmm.
whatever it is that's at the top of their head, they attribute politics to that, and they'll bring you into that conversation. Normal people, at least. Like if you're talking to a political person, you could spend hours just talking about bullshit that doesn't matter. But like when you're talking to someone on the streets, it's like, oh, what would you like to see your city councilman focus on? And they'll tell you like, oh, well, this library needs renovations. Just like getting to talk to people about what actually matters to them was by far my favorite part of it. I got more votes than people that I talked to or doors that I knocked, so that made me feel good that like clearly people were telling other people about me, um, or just really didn't like the other two candidates and voted third party. But um, I really got to like connect with my area and win people over to things. Like I had a bunch of people push back on the fact that I wanted to legalize cannabis. Like that was one of the things I got the most pushback on the street, which I found weird because I thought most of Brooklyn was fine with cannabis, especially that part of Brooklyn. So I really got to like have that conversation with people of, why legalizing cannabis is actually good and helpful, and why it's not going to mean that your 13-year-old is going to start smoking weed, and why it actually means that there's significantly less likelihood that your 13-year-old will start smoking weed if we legalize it and put it in a dispensary instead of stop selling it on the street corner. um, and like just got to really have these conversations with people and understand where they're coming from. And it was great because I've spent way too long in a political echo chamber of just kind of talking to other libertarians and other just kind of liberty minded people from bumfuck nowhere. um, and it was great to actually understand what normal people think. And since then I've just continued doing politics. Like I quit my job to run for office, and I haven't worked full time in anything other than politics since. And it's great. Like I love just getting to talk to a couple hundred people a day, and most of them are fucking morons. Like just so dumb. Like these people legitimately think that like millions of rapists and murderers are coming over our southern border from Mexico. Like there's these people that just feed off of mainstream media and all of the lies that they tell, and they're morons. But it's great to actually understand how moronic the average person is, because you can get really kind of caught up in, oh well, of course people think this because that's just logical.
Yeah.
People aren't logical. People are emotional based, and they listen to whatever the people that they love tell them. And for some people, the people that they love is Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson. And it creates some really interesting people. But it's nice to kind of like just sprinkle in little bits of truth into those conversations. And even when I'm working for like a Republican or a Democrat, and I kind of have to put on a mask and act a little bit more like one or the other, I still get to kind of pull them out of their echo chamber just a little bit. And I'll like throw just a little bit of pushback onto the Republicans, be like, well, like, I mean, cannabis really isn't that bad. Like we've seen it in other states get legalized. None of the fear mongering has been true. Like, and like we're small government Republicans, right? Like why do we want to expand a police state to try to criminalize this thing? We want the government to be as small and useless as possible, right? And kind of like, just sprinkle in those little things here and there is super fun. uh and I've never found something that makes me feel more fulfilled in my daily life. So
Well, you
it's been great.
found your purpose. Let me ask you this: you were talking about um, other people, and I had a thought while you were saying. Well, I remember talking to other libertarians about, is there anything that the socialists get right? And there are a handful of things, one or two, three things that we can agree upon, and part of that too is drug legalization. So, with that said, you know, that Cortez AOC Congresswoman Bernie Sanders, are you fearful of the rise of their popularity, and or is this just a trend that will die out? Um,
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, I was a fan of AOC when she ran in 2018.
Mhm.
The incumbent that she beat in the Democratic primary is one of the most corrupt politicians to like ever exist in the United States. He's now the highest paid lobbyist in Washington D.C. He was going to be Speaker of the House. If AOC hadn't beat if AOC hadn't won, Nancy Pelosi would not be Speaker of the House. So like she took out one of the worst, just
Mhm.
most corrupt Democrats, and I loved that. And she was running on like a woman of the people, and I don't agree with a lot of her economic stances, but I
Mhm.
liked what she was doing and the fact that she was able to build this grassroots movement and really just destroy like this really entrenched Democrat. And then she like instantly showed her hand that she was just bought, paid for, and just an actress playing a part, basically. As soon as she got to Washington, she was full of shit. Um, Sanders, Sanders, I think, is probably at the end of his political relevancy. To be perfectly honest with you,
I looked him
I
up.
think
He's
he
81.
has to run for reelection in 24, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't even know if he's going to.
He's
Yeah, like he needs to just retire and go home. Like like regardless of his political stances, he needs
yeah.
to retire and go home. Like even if you like I think the same thing about Ron Paul, for the record. Like
Mhm.
he needs to like take care of himself and like just enjoy the rest of his life. I love everything that he has to say, but I hate watching people just like age and get geriatric in the public eye. It's sad to me. So I think Bernie should just go home. But as far as the rise of the socialists, just in general, I I'm not necessarily worried because we're already not a free market country. We're already mostly socialist as it is.
Mm.
And a lot of the socialists' plans are better. Like, because right now we're kind of running a worst of both worlds approach where it's like, oh, we're going to have free markets and public or in like private companies doing everything, but it's going to all be funded through tax dollars. And we're just going to waste as much money as we possibly can on all of this stuff. Like there's some numbers that I've seen run on a way that like universal healthcare could actually cost less than what we currently spend on just Medicare and Medicaid because of
Mhm.
how much waste we have in the Medicare and Medicaid systems. Uh, so I look at some of those plans like that, and I'm intrigued. I'd rather see them implemented on a state level than a federal level, obviously, because they're more likely to succeed on a state level, and they're more likely to like be able to actually be what everyone wants on a state level. If Vermont goes completely commie, all right, who cares? Like, I don't live in Vermont, and most people in Vermont would probably like that. So, like, doesn't matter to me. But I I honestly think that for the most part, most of these socialists that we're seeing rise in popularity are just controlled opposition, like Bernie, like AOC. It's just people that'll be like, yeah, we're for the people, and the people should vote for Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. And it's like, you're not a man of the people if you're endorsing and campaigning for Joe Biden. Like, fun fact, Bernie Sanders did more campaign events for Biden after the primary than Biden did.
Yeah, because he couldn't stand and talk for three.
Right.
I think Bernie Sanders is a little bit older and he had a heart attack and he's more healthy than Joe Biden is. I mean, Joe Biden gets shot up with like some steroid
Yeah.
and gives a speech and goes home and watches Matlock. So I mean, I mean, all due respect to the president, um, it's amazing how
Which is about this much.
oh yeah, a little bit, because he's still the leader of your country and but no, it's no, so so you just are on the opinion of just AOC's an Instagram celebrity and Bernie Sanders is just going to die out. Are you afraid at all? Just like, because I mean, again, like in 2008, 2012, a lot of young people were into libertarianism, freedom, keep your money, um, the social liberalism and the fiscal conservative. You keep your money and live the life as you choose. Now they're just
Mhm.
um, AOCs, and Bernie Sanders. Let's let all this stuff. Are you concerned about just that the mentality and what that means for the coming generations? If that makes sense.
Yeah, um, for sure. I definitely am worried by this. What I'm really seeing is like the what you're talking about with the social issues of like, live the way you want to live, the stuff that I agree with the left on really hard. A lot of that stuff got co-opted by the economic side of things. So people think that they have to be a commie to think that we need to legalize psilocybin,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't, right? But if you just look at America today, you see very few right-wing economic people arguing for legalizing drugs. You see people like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard or AOC talking about it, not anyone on the right. And especially because most people don't even know the Libertarian Party exists, they still think that they have two choices. It's either these racist assholes or these people who want to help people. Like that's how a lot of people are seeing it. It's like these guys care all about themselves and their own money, and these people want to help other people, get them out of jail, feed homeless, yada yada yada. And for most young kind of liberal-ish types, like that's definitely more inviting. And if I had grown up in a blue area, I probably would have gotten pulled into that myself. Luckily, I grew up in a red part of a blue state and kind of grew up already kind of libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think we need to do is show people um, that the social and the economic have nothing to do with each other in all reality. Like because both sides are trying to justify one using the other. Because the Republicans are pretty much doing the exact opposite. They're like, oh, we're going to help keep taxes low and help you keep your money. And they're using that as a guise to just like pass all of these other laws and try to legislate their own Christian morality. Like we're seeing in Florida right now, they're trying to literally ban kids from talking about being gay in school.
I
Like
read about that.
that's not okay. That's just like like there's nothing libertarian or Republican about what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida right now. Nothing. Like it
Mm.
is pure authoritarianism. It is pure like North Korean USSR level communist authoritarian bullshit. But he's being championed because he's Ron DeSantis and he's this great like anti-government Republican person. And so we're seeing this just bait and switch on both sides. And the quicker we teach people that you don't have to be on a side and you don't have to believe in that side entirely,
Mm.
the quicker we can people can stop getting baited and switched. Because you can support Ron DeSantis for being like anti-mandate and then shit on him for this. Or the leftists, you can support them championing drug decriminalization and then shit on them when they try to force mask mandates or something like that. You can be nuanced, and the quicker the electorate becomes nuanced like that, the better we are. I don't know how long that's going to happen or how long it's going to take for that to happen personally.
Well, time will only tell. Um, I guess I want to get your opinion on a few more things before I wrap up. But you had some kind of history with Tulsi Gabbard. I think I saw online. So
Yes.
she's a not this. I don't want to mention his name a lot. Like I prop him up a lot. Joe Rogan loves her and gave her a platform of where she can be seen. And I mean, I don't really usually vote Democrat, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, I think she's a good candidate, and I think she was at CPAC. I mean, so talk about, can we get more of her and possibly get more of her people like her in office, or is that a good thing in your mind?
God, I
Or
hope so.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I worked with her. I was just a volunteer and then became her deputy volunteer coordinator for New Hampshire and then became her deputy volunteer coordinator nationally for the last probably 2.5 months of the campaign. And I got to spend about 2 months, 2.5 months straight where I saw her almost every day for like multiple hours a day and really actually got to know her. And Tulsi Gabbard is one of the best people I've ever met. Like just to the core, just actually a good person who is there to help people and who fully and truly believes that everything that she's doing is for the best. Do I disagree with her on some stuff? For sure. But the fact that she's going at it from a place of like, how do I help people and how do I make the best decision? How do I best represent my constituents? Even if I disagree with my constituents here, um, just kind of blew me away of how like actually good of a representative she was and how she's kind of doing it the way it was supposed to be done, like the way that we wrote the Constitution. Because like she gets a lot of flack for being a yes vote on the assault weapons ban back in 2018, which obviously I disagree with that vote, right? But so does she. She wasn't going to vote yes until her constituency just roasted the fuck out of her and told her that she better fucking vote yes because
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii is extremely anti-gun. They just don't have them. It's a completely different culture there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just they don't think you need guns. And so she did her job and represented her constituency and voted yes, which again, even though I disagree with that vote, I can't be mad at her for that. Um,
Because you can understand,
and so
like you were
yeah,
saying,
like
the
I would
culture behind it.
rather yeah, I would rather her be a good representative and vote against me as an upstate New Yorker um than like just vote everything that she thinks and not care about her constituency. So yeah, I genuinely hope and pray that we could get more people like her in office, but I think there's a reason we don't have her in office anymore. People like her don't last too long. Same with people like Justin Amash, or even to go back to Ron Paul. You know, he kind of bounced in and out of Congress, never actually made it to Senate, never made it to the presidency, because people who actually are genuine, decent people don't last long in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is kind of to go back to what I was saying earlier about like focusing on harm reduction instead of electoral politics, because I think the good people are pretty much incapable of really creating that change that they want to see through that system. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard was great. She had Amash and Thomas Massey and a couple other people in Congress with her that were also great. And we still didn't pull out of any wars. We still didn't lower the debt. We still didn't we still didn't do anything right with even with a dozen good legislators in Congress. I don't think 2 dozen is really going to make a big difference. And I think those people could probably do a lot more good for the world outside of politics.
Maybe.
I think she's running for the GOP nomination in 24, though, just to put the bow on the Tulsi conversation. That CPAC speech was fucking great. And I really think she's looking for a GOP run.
Wow, I didn't know that. Well, I'll tell you one thing: they didn't treat her well in the Democratic Party, so no, she has no loyalty to them. Um,
Mm.
and she's on Fox News all the time. I think she. I mean, I think she's definitely running. I mean, for something. I mean, she keeps getting on television, and if you're getting on television, you're keeping in the public eye. You got to be seen. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I wanted to ask before was just because I didn't ask this before, but you mentioned it. So you grew up in a household where it was more libertarian leaning. Like, so how does someone
Mhm.
like everyone's kind of got their story because it's a thinking man's ideology, libertarianism, or it's not the traditional. I think most people live in a conservative or liberal, modern liberal household. So how did you come to these ideas?
It's actually one of my favorite stories now, especially because I know the full story. My dad and I just had this conversation probably like 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So yeah, I was raised in what I would call like a constitutional conservative household. Um, I grew up like respecting and trusting, or I grew up respecting the government and police and like all of that stuff. You know, the cops are the good guys, the criminals are the bad guys. Like I was still very like ingrained in that semi-statist mindset. But I also grew up learning to like learn how to do your taxes really well so you can pay as little as you possibly can because taxes are stupid. And like if you can avoid calling the cops, do so always. Like we had our house broken into when I was like maybe 13 or something like that. Like front window was shattered. But nothing we could find was missing. It looked like we showed up just in time and they like ran. um so we didn't call the cops. Like fuck it, why do we want piggies at our house? Like, and I
Mhm.
remember that just kind of baffling me at the time, that we like wouldn't call the cops when our house got broken into. And so I was raised, yeah, that very like respect the government but don't trust it. um and then 2016 came around. I was 19, and um I was looking at the candidates that we could vote for in the first election that I was going to be voting in. And I was like, all of you guys suck. Like, it was pretty much down to just like Trump, Cruz, Clinton, and Sanders. Right. And I was just like, all of these options suck. And so, like, every night at the dinner table, I was talking about politics because I was like really starting to get into it. And I just like hated all of these people. And I was just shitting on them and complaining and complaining and complaining. And so, my dad thought that if he could show me a candidate that I actually liked, it might shut me up.
Mhm.
That was his thought process, which I find fucking hilarious because it did not work. So he introduced me to Gary Johnson. He had like seen something about him like on Facebook or whatever, and he was like, "Hey, I saw this guy. You should look him up. Maybe you'll like him." In his mind, he's like, "Yes, finally, David will stop talking about politics at the dinner table." Little did he know, now I'm a fucking podcaster, and like all I do is talk about politics all day,
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I looked up Gary Johnson. I found out that I could have guns and drugs in the same candidate, uh, which is unheard of in either of the other two parties. I wasn't even a stoner yet. I had never smoked weed when I voted for Gary Johnson, but I knew that it should be legal, right? I
Mhm.
had that idea that morality and legality are two different things. And so, yeah, I voted for Gary Johnson, and then kind of looked more into his platform, more into the party, and went to my first Libertarian Party meeting in January of 2017, and been a part of it since. Worked for Larry Sharp in 2018, ran myself in 2019, then Tulsi in 2020, and kind of just bounced around for the last year and a half all over the place.
Yeah. So I like that you said that you had respect for the government, but not trust it. Still show respect, because we're not trying to completely upend the system. I think there's still, I personally still, you know, I like America. I like the idea of America, and it's been good to me and my family. So it's, I still give loyalty to it, but health in a certain way, you still always know that, they serve by the will of the people, not the other way around. I think that's very important. I mean, I don't want to get too dramatic, but I do like that line. Like, government should be people shouldn't be afraid of the government, but government should be afraid of its people. I think there's some
Mm-hmm.
lesson to be learned there in that, you work for us, not vice versa. I think that's just, I mean, you don't have to be militant about it because, but at the same time, I think that's a good strong arm there. So, is there
Yeah.
anything you can end us with, like just like a positive note? We started this conversation, and remember, we just got to know each other a little bit, like of where the society is ending in 20 years, 20, 40 years. So I guess, yeah, I don't want to end on that note. Um, what can we do? What can people do just to get the ideas of libertarianism out there, but also just help America go back to as it was meant to be?
I think the first thing that people can do is, I know that I've kind of shat on electoral politics most of
Mm-hmm.
this episode, but the first thing that I would encourage, especially because it's 2022, this is a fairly important election year. Um, Actually look up all of the candidates on your ballot and make sure that there are third party candidates. Like, I don't care what third party, like Green
Mhm.
Party, Libertarian, Reform, Independent, whatever. Look these people up, see if you agree with them more than the other two, and vote third party this year. If we can even if we just show up and prove to the duopoly that like a lot of people are not playing their game anymore, if we can just get like nationally like maybe 10-15% of the vote just scattered across the third parties and independent candidates, that would mean a lot. um, the second thing I would say is get involved in some sort of nonprofit or charity in your area that is tackling a problem that you really care about. Whether that's housing homeless, feeding the hungry, um, you know teaching inner city kids, like tutoring inner city kids that can't afford it, like whatever it is, find a nonprofit that's solving something that you care about and get involved, and use that as an opportunity to teach people why people help people better than government does every time. uh, and and that's, in my experience, the most successful way to teach someone that the government sucks, is by proving to them that like I'm taking my free time to help you better than any government ever could or would ever want to. um, and they can see that, like you can
Mhm.
tell the difference between a public school teacher and a charity supplied tutor. Like it's night and day difference about how much these people care about the kids. And so that's like my main two things. Don't vote for shitty candidates and incumbents that are just going to do the same thing over and over again, and try to help people from outside the system.
I actually like that the end note because I remember talking to people and just being like, how do you start this conversation that of limited government in a strong way? And they're just like, yo, just say people are basically good and want to help people. You don't need just because a guy's working at the government doesn't mean he wants to help you. And I think people are aware of that. It's just
Mhm.
some of them are just a silent majority. I mean, all right. I think that was a great moment to end on. David, what? How can people find you? Do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so Twitter at David Fite, Fite, or at Fight for Liberty. Instagram at Fight for Liberty. Same with Facebook. The YouTube channel and Odyssey are both Fight for Liberty. Um, Odyssey is the place that I plug the most. If you want to watch my show, go there because they're better than YouTube or Facebook or any of the other platforms as far as free speech goes. And so go check out the Odyssey. And yeah, that's it.
All right, all right. That's all, folks.
I need to get better at that like little plug spot. Like
It's you're fine. You're fine. Honestly, it's if people want to hear it, they'll listen back to it. I kind of noticed just by doing this kind of a thing that the raw, uncut interviews. It's not podcasting is interesting because podcasting has made it taking radio the hey, this is 710 WOR, Mark Simone, like that vibe, that old school radio. Now is because people have been able to do podcasts and anybody can do it anywhere at varying degrees, whether or not they have the talent to. People have been more accepting of just how kind of, lack of a better word, sloppy it can be. I mean, you want a good sound, you want people to be taking it seriously, yes, but they're more forgiving of just the rawness of it. Let's put
yeah,
you that way. So, I think if people want like what you want to say and they want to hear more, they'll find you. It's interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean that's all. Tom, let's see you next week. Goodbye, Dave Kachowski.